Hi guys, welcome to activity 4. You kind of get a break from Excel and SPSS this week, and we're just doing hand calculations and reiterations of conceptual stuff that was taught in the lecture. So here are the equations that I gave you in the lecture. You can use any of these to calculate some of the requested calculations down in the questions below. Basically what I've given you is a single research design. This is actually pretty similar to a research project that I'll be doing hopefully starting in January. So it kind of mimics a real situation, right? In kinesiology, we're specifically looking at postural control in individuals with Huntington's disease. So I kind of created this fictional how many people we have in a given sample size. You're looking at what the effect of a 12-week dance intervention will do to balance outcomes in these patients. And you're going to be using these 3 different tests. I've kind of indicated what the unit of measurement is for each of these tests as well as what the results mean. I don't know if any of you are familiar with these tests. If you've worked in a PT clinic, maybe you've done these different things with individuals before. But the frequency of measurements, we have a baseline measurement taken prior to the intervention as well as the 12-week benchmark so that we can see the difference between start and stop times, right? So these first questions are very similar to stuff that you've seen both on the exam and previous activities. You're going to note what the independent variable or independent variables are, classify the type of data that you think this is, and then if the independent variable has multiple levels or specific groupings, how many are there, and identify them. If you don't think the independent variable has any levels, you can just put NA or none. That would also count as an answer. Okay. You'll also note what the dependent variable or dependent variables are, as well as the type of data. And then you'll comment, is the study design comparing within subjects or between subjects? This was kind of a topic at the very end of the lecture where we distinguished who we're collecting within the sample or who we're comparing within the sample. So just to see if you were paying attention, okay? Here are the hypothetical results that I made up, all right? Generally, I think they're actually pretty comparable with the Huntington's disease population, but this isn't real by any means. So using these results, you're assuming the data have been randomly sampled and normally distributed. So you're going to calculate the following calculations given the results above. You'll do the confidence intervals, right? A 90% level of confidence for the FRT measurements, 95% level of confidence for the Tug measurements, 99% level of confidence for the BBS measurements. So in each of these, you should have all of your work shown. Okay, so anything that you have to calculate prior to getting your confidence interval, as well as the equation for your confidence interval, should be included in here. And then maybe you can highlight your answers in yellow or something. You can handwrite your answers in this area, or you can feel free to use the equation function in Word. So in this area, maybe you say this is like my baseline, and then you can insert an equation and then type in how you would have written your work out. That probably might come out cleaner. If you decide to do your written work, you can either scan it in as a PDF, or you can, if you're able to print it out and you write, if you have an iPhone, you can actually go to Notes, and then when you create a new note, there should be an option at the bottom to take a picture. When you click on that picture camera, it should give you the option to scan documents. If you're not an Apple user, there is a really cool app that I've actually used a lot outside of classes called Adobe Scan. It's a teal icon that has the Adobe symbol or the swirly A. in it, and you can also create PDFs through pictures with that app. If you have more questions on those, I'm happy to share them. But in here you should have two sets of equations, one for baseline, one for 12-week. Same thing for this one, and same thing for part 3. Underneath that, you're going to answer this question, right? You're a researcher, or you, the researcher, believe that the 99% confidence intervals for the baseline and 12-week BBS assessments are too wide. In other words, this indicates that there might be too much variability in the sample data, such that the interval in which the population mean has been estimated is too ambiguous to draw sufficient conclusions with regards to the true population. So, what two strategies did we cover in the lecture that might be effective in correcting the interval width, such that the width is narrower around the true population mean? Now remember, this is kind of BS data, so true I'm using very loosely, but also you can think about in a real research situation, we hardly ever know the actual population mean. So a lot of times working off of sample means give us this pseudo true population mean, and then we're able to figure out kind of where that population mean lands based on a lot of repetitive data or repetitive research on a given topic. Alright, so that kind of concludes the confidence interval stuff. Then you're going to be looking at measures of error, specifically alpha or type 1 error. So with each of these confidence or levels of confidence, you're going to write out what alpha would equal. And in this case, you still need to show all of your work. Okay, so there is an equation. Again, you can write it out, or you can use the equation function in Word. The last question in this section is, in general, what does alpha represent in terms of probability? If you write alpha represents type 1 error, that is not acceptable. Okay, so in terms of probability, what does it refer to? Alright, and then I wanted you guys to practice interpretation of results. Okay, so you're going to write out what the null and the research hypotheses are, write them out in words, okay, considering all measurements. So you're just going to refer to all of those as balance outcomes. So instead of writing FRT, TUG, and BBS, just write balance outcomes. You're going to assume statistics are producing two-tailed tests. Okay, so that should give you a hint on how you're going to write your hypotheses. Remember that these should be mutually exclusive, so that's another hint. Okay, and then I gave you 3 situations based on each of the tests, and again, hypothetical results. So in the first one, you have a statistical test results show that the difference between the mean FRT differences or distances for baseline and 12-week measurements are significantly different. Using a 90% level of confidence, how would you interpret these results? So I gave you a hint here. You're determining basically if you accept or reject the null based on that first sentence of information, and then you're going to write out the actual interpretation. Okay. Similarly, in the second one, you have results show that the differences between mean BBS scores for baseline and 12-week measurements is not significant. So using a 99% level of confidence, how would you write this in terms of a p-value? So you're going to indicate the p-value, right, whether it's less than, greater than, or equal to some given alpha value, and you're going to write out the interpretation of that p-value, kind of similar to the hint up here where you determine if you accept or reject the null, and then write it out in words. The last question is going to look at the Tug Times. So we're going to say the results show that the difference between mean Tug Times for baseline and 12-week measurements has a p-value less than 0.05. So how would you interpret this? Again, figure out if you're rejecting or accepting the null, and then write that out in words. All of this should equal up to 30 points. Okay, so all you're turning in this week is the answer sheet. You can either save it as a Word document or a PDF, and you'll turn it in by next Monday, which I believe is the 5th. Yes, October 5th. by 11:59. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me or post in the discussion forum for this week.